welcome back. Today we are talking about something that most people spend their entire lives chasing and never actually find: real, unshakable emotion. Not fake positivity, not pretending you don't feel anything. Real, grounded, quiet strength that lets you walk through insults, betrayal, failure, and heartbreak without falling apart. This is the art of becoming emotionally untouchable, and it comes from one of the most practical philosophies ever created, Stoicism. The men who built this philosophy were not monks hiding in caves. They were emperors, slaves, statesmen, and soldiers who lived through war, exile, betrayal, and loss, and still found a way to remain calm. In the next few minutes, you are going to learn 10 lessons from their lives that you can start using today. Stay until the end, because lesson number 7 alone has the power to change how you handle every difficult person in your life. Most people believe that emotional pain comes from what happens to them. Someone insults you and you feel anger. Someone leaves you and you feel grief. Someone criticizes your work and you feel shame. It seems obvious, almost too obvious to question. But the Stoics discovered something radical almost 2,000 years ago that modern psychology is only now catching up to. It is not the event itself that hurts you. It is the judgment you attach to that event. A man named Epictetus, who spent years of his life as a slave before becoming one of the most respected philosophers in Rome, taught that people are disturbed not by things, but by their opinions about things. Think about that for a moment. The insult someone throws at you is just sound waves traveling through air. It has no power on its own. The power comes entirely from the meaning you assign to it. This is the first lesson, and it is the foundation for everything else we are about to cover. You cannot always control what happens to you. You cannot control who lies about you, who leaves you, who disrespects you, or what tragedy shows up uninvited in your life. But you have absolute total control over how you interpret those events, and that interpretation is where your suffering actually lives. Once you understand this, you stop being a victim of circumstance and you become the architect of your own emotional reality. This single shift, understanding that your reactions are chosen and not forced, is the doorway into everything that follows. The second lesson builds directly on the first, and it is about the space between what happens and how you respond. Most people live their entire lives in a straight line from stimulus to reaction. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and your hand is already on the horn before you have even processed what happened. Someone sends a cutting text message, and your thumbs are typing a reply filled with anger before you have taken a single breath. The Stoics were obsessed with widening that gap. Marcus Aurelius, a man who ruled the most powerful empire on earth and still faced betrayal from those closest to him, would write to himself every single night, reminding himself to pause before reacting to the people who frustrated him during the day. He knew that in that tiny space between the trigger, and the response lies your entire freedom as a human being. When you react instantly, you are not actually choosing anything. You are simply running a program, an automatic script written by your ego and your fear. But when you pause, even for 3 seconds, even for one breath, you interrupt that program and you insert your own free will into the equation. This is why emotionally untouchable people often seem slower to react than everyone else. It is not because they feel less. It is because they have trained themselves to create distance between the spark and the explosion, and in that distance, wisdom has room to breathe. The third lesson is one that terrifies most people the first time they hear it, and it is called amor fati, which simply means love of fate. The Stoics did not just tolerate difficulty. They trained themselves to actively embrace it, to treat every obstacle as necessary fuel rather than an unwanted interruption. Seneca, one of the wealthiest and most influential men in Rome, lost his fortune, was exiled from his home, and eventually was ordered to take his own life by an emperor he had once tutored. And yet his writings are filled not with bitterness, but with a strange, steady gratitude for the trials that shaped him. This is not about pretending that pain feels good. It is about recognizing that resistance to what has already happened is a pointless drain of your energy. The event is already in the past. Fighting it mentally changes nothing except your own peace of mind. When you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What can this teach me?" you take the exact same event and strip it of its power over you. This does not mean you become passive or stop trying to improve your circumstances. It means you stop wasting emotional energy on the parts of life you cannot rewrite, so that all of your strength is available for the parts you can. The fourth lesson is a practice the Stoics used almost like mental armor, and it is called negative visualization. Every morning, instead of imagining everything going perfectly, they would spend a few minutes imagining loss. What if I lost my job today? What if someone I love said something cruel to me? What if my band's completely depressing on the surface? But it is actually one of the most freeing exercises a person can practice. When you mentally rehearse difficulty in a calm, controlled setting, you strip the real event of its shock value when it eventually arrives. You are no longer caught off guard because some part of you has already walked through that scenario and survived it. This is the same principle behind why soldiers train with live drills before combat and why pilots practice emergency landings in simulators long before they ever need to use those skills for real. Emotional resilience works the same. The people who seem unshakable when disaster strikes are usually not the people who got lucky. They are the people who quietly prepared their minds in advance so that when life finally tested them, they were simply executing a plan rather than reacting in panic. The fifth lesson is about something almost every person on this earth struggles with, and that is the constant, exhausting need for approval from others. We check how many people liked our post. We replay conversations wondering if we said the right thing. We shape our decisions around what other people might think, often without even realizing we are doing it. The Stoics saw this as one of the most dangerous traps a person could fall into, because it means you have handed the steering wheel of your own life to an audience that is, quite frankly, not thinking about you nearly as much as you assume. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly that other people's opinions of him were simply not his business to control or manage. He could act with integrity, speak honestly, and behave with virtue, but what people chose to think about those actions afterward belonged entirely to them. This distinction between your actions and other people's reactions to your actions is one of the most liberating ideas in all of Stoic philosophy. The moment you stop trying to manage what other people think of you, an enormous weight lifts off your shoulders. You start making decisions based on your own values instead of a popularity contest that you were never actually going to win anyway, because no matter what you do, someone somewhere will disapprove. The sixth lesson deals directly with one of the most disruptive emotions a human being can experience, and that is anger. The Stoics did not view anger as some uncontrollable force of nature that simply happens to you. They viewed it as a choice, a habit of mind that could be unlearned just as easily as it was learned. Seneca wrote an entire book on the subject, describing anger as a kind of temporary madness, something that feels powerful in the moment but almost always leads to actions and words that a calmer version of yourself would regret. The key insight here is that anger requires your consent. Someone can provoke you, insult you, disrespect you, but the actual feeling of rage that follows is something your mind produces, not something that is forced directly into your body like an injection. When you start to see anger as a choice rather than an inevitability, you gain the power to interrupt it. This does not mean suppressing your feelings or pretending you are fine when you are not. It means recognizing the moment anger begins to rise and consciously deciding whether you want to hand your power over to that emotion or hold on to your composure instead. The seventh lesson might be the single most practical tool for dealing with difficult people, and it is the discipline of silence. Not silence out of weakness or fear, but silence as a deliberate, powerful choice. The Stoics believe that not every insult deserves a response, not every provocation deserves your energy, and not every person who tries to drag you into conflict deserves access to your emotions. There is a certain kind of strength in simply not engaging, in letting a comment pass by without feeling the need to defend yourself or prove a point. When you constantly explain yourself, constantly justify your choices to people who were never going to understand them anyway, you are giving away your power piece by piece. Emotionally untouchable people have learned to let some things simply exist without a response. They understand that silence often communicates more confidence than the most articulate defense ever could, and that the people who truly matter in your life do not require constant explanations from you in the first place. The eighth lesson is about separating your sense of self from outcomes that are outside your control. Many people tie their entire identity to results. If the business succeeds, I am successful. If the relationship works out, I am worthy of love. If people admire my work, I have value. The problem with this approach is that outcomes are influenced by countless factors outside your control, from the economy to other people's decisions to plain luck. The Stoics taught that you should pour your full effort into your actions, your character, and your discipline while remaining detached from the specific results those actions produce. This does not mean you stop caring about outcomes. It means your sense of worth no longer rises and falls with every twist of fate. When your identity is rooted in your effort and your integrity rather than in things you cannot fully control, you become remarkable. Success does not inflate you, and failure does not shatter you, because your value was never actually located in either one. The ninth lesson concerns how you receive criticism, and it might be one of the hardest shifts to make, because criticism has a way of feeling like a direct attack on who you are as a person. The Stoics encouraged a different framework entirely. Treat criticism as information rather than injury. If someone points out a genuine flaw in your work or your character, that is useful data you can use to improve. If someone criticizes you unfairly or out of their own bitterness, their words say far more about their inner state than they say about you. Either way, there is no need to be wounded by it. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that people who insult or criticize him were usually acting out of their own ignorance or suffering, and that understanding this made it far easier to respond with patience rather than defensiveness. When you stop treating every piece of criticism as a threat to your identity, you free yourself to actually learn from the parts that are true and to release the parts that are not, without your emotional stability hanging in the balance either way. The 10th and final lesson is the practice of voluntary discomfort, something the Stoics used almost like exercise for the mind. They would deliberately choose to go without certain comforts, sleeping on the floor instead of a bed, eating plain food instead of feasts, or wearing simple clothing instead of fine garments, not because they were poor, but because they wanted to prove to themselves that they could handle discomfort without falling apart. This practice builds a kind of quiet confidence, a deep internal knowledge that you can survive loss, discomfort, and hardship, because you have already voluntarily faced smaller versions of it on your own terms. In modern life, this might look like a cold shower, a day of fasting, or simply choosing the harder path when an easier one is available. The point is not suffering for its own sake. The point is proving to yourself again and again that you are far more resilient than your comfort zone has led you to believe. If you take these 10 lessons and actually apply them, even imperfectly, even slowly, you will notice something remarkable begin to happen. The things that used to ruin your entire day will start to feel small. The people who used to control your mood with a single sentence will start to lose their grip on you. You will begin responding to life instead of simply reacting to it, and that shift alone will change nearly every relationship and every challenge you face from this point forward. This is not about becoming cold or emotionless. It is about becoming so grounded in your own values and your own sense of self that the storms of life move around you instead of through you. If this video gave you even one idea you can use today, do us a favor and hit that like button, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next lesson. Drop a comment below telling us which of these 10 lessons hit you the hardest, because we read every single one. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video. If this video helped you even a little, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Drop a comment below and let us know which lesson you needed to hear today.